Right, Paloma, take it away.
Okay. Hi, thanks to everyone who joined. I appreciate you joining me tonight. Um, this seminar is about buying a home, steps to home ownership. So that's what we're going to be talking about tonight. It's great to have you join me, and obviously by your joining gives me the idea that you're interested in buying a home, or maybe just got started thinking about buying or started looking. So this is a great first step to kind of understanding all of the the path to get there, and laying the foundation for your financial future. So let's get started. My name is Paloma Vila. I'm with Keller Real Estate. I'm a resident of School Township myself, and I'm a big fan of this community, and I proudly give back by donating a portion of every real estate commission to charity. I organize quarterly donation drives, support local businesses and nonprofits, and I volunteer with community organizations and host free events like this one to give back to the community. I help buyers, sellers, and investors locally throughout Chester County, Montgomery County, Philadelphia, and beyond. And I pride myself in being a trusted advisor to my clients and helping make their transitions as smooth as possible. So for everyone who's joined tonight, I'm offering a free treat at Paloma's Market on Bridge Street in Phoenixville when you provide feedback after the presentation. So I'm just going to go ahead and drop that in the chat, my contact info and the form for feedback. I would really appreciate just hearing from you guys what you liked and what you learned. So this is going to be a pretty informal presentation. I'm not going to have slides just because I personally don't really like watching people click through slides. So I'd rather it be more conversational. And I'm just going to be talking through the basics. That'll help you if you're thinking about buying, and give you some tips and tricks based on the current market that we're in. There are going to be a few times that I ask for your thoughts and opinions on things, and I would love to hear either put your responses in the chat or just unmute yourself and respond, just to keep this a little bit more engaging. And it's late. I don't want anyone falling asleep on me. But for the sake of time and the flow of things, if you have any questions outside of that, just drop it in the chat and I'll do my best to answer it in the moment or go circle back and answer it at the end. So I'm going to start with this question. Is there anything specific that you guys are hoping to get out of today? Is there a reason that you specifically chose this seminar to attend? And what would you like to walk away knowing or understanding? So if you want to just unmute yourself or drop that in the chat, I'll give you about a minute to do that. In the meanwhile, while you guys are typing that, I'm just going to go over the agenda. So I'm going to talk about fears versus facts about buying a home. I'm going to talk about the realities of our market. I'm going to talk about the steps to becoming a homeowner. I'll talk about financing and mortgages, and then I'll talk about your next steps to getting started. Okay. I don't see any questions in the chat, so I'm going to assume that you guys are just here for a general overview. But if you have any specific questions as I continue, go ahead and put that in. Okay, so I want to start with facts, fears versus facts. So what I found with home buyers, and especially when it's your first home, is that there's a lot of fear. And there might even be so much fear that you aren't even ready to start because of those fears. So I want to kind of address some of those, some of the more common ones, and see if that gives you guys a little bit more peace of mind. So the biggest one is I can't afford a home, or I don't know if I can afford a home. So the fact about that is you really don't know if you can afford it until you do the math, or until you talk to a lender who will tell you what you qualify for and put together a budget accordingly. So, but in general, if you're paying rent, you might be able to buy a home. A lot of times market rent is about the same as a mortgage payment when you factor in taxes, insurance, and everything else. You might, if you're purchasing a home with another person, obviously, you've split those costs. So you'd be surprised, a lot of people who think they can't afford a home, when you run the numbers, it turns out to be really similar to renting. And then the best part about that is, instead of, you're putting that same money, but towards something that you own, and we'll talk about building equity and all that and why that's beneficial. Another fear, especially right now, because it's a crazy market, is maybe I should wait until the market slows down a little bit. So what I say to that is, we don't know if the market's going to slow down. We don't know when it's going to slow down. We don't know if it ever will slow down. But what we do know is things change, and we don't know if they're going to get better or worse. The market could get even more competitive. Things could get even more pricey. But the fact of the matter is, if the math makes sense, if you can afford it, real estate is over time an appreciating asset, and you're paying down your mortgage. So even though it's a competitive market, it might not be a fun market to buy a house in. It might be tough. You might be up against multiple offers, but there's never a bad time to buy the right home. So my job as a realtor is to help my buyers find a good buy and make sure you have the financial ability to hold on to it. I would never recommend to someone to buy a home if it's stretching yourself thin financially. But if it makes sense financially, even though this is a crazy market, it's still a good time to buy. And we'll talk about interest rates and all that too, which makes it another good reason to buy. But over time, the investment in your home will grow regardless of the market. Another big one is, I don't have the money for a down payment. Who here knows what the minimum down payment is for a home? Okay, so I see 20%. Right, so that's a common misconception, is a lot of people think that you need at least 3% of the home value to purchase a house. But actually most loans are 3.5 or 3 to 3.5%. And there are even zero money down loans. So it's a lot less than people think. That 20% is actually an old, outdated number. And there are benefits to putting 20% down, but it's by no means the minimum. There's also a lot of loan programs that have incentives for first-time home buyers that offer grants or money to help you with your down payment and your closing costs. I should add, in addition to 3%, there are closing costs. So, 3% isn't your only number, but at least it's not 20%. But there are programs and things like that that help with that. So again, until you sit down and do the math and crunch the numbers, I wouldn't rule out home ownership just yet. A big one is, I can't afford to buy my dream home. Yes, I can afford a house that's the same as my rent, but that's not the home that I want to live in forever. And what I say to that is, the best way to get your dream home is to buy your first home. And the reason I say that is because you're going to pay down that loan, that house is going to continue to appreciate, and then you'll be able to sell that and use the proceeds to buy a bigger home or a better home or a home in a different location or whatever it is that makes it your dream home. The best chance of you being able to do that is not by saving for the next 20 years and paying money towards rent that you're never going to see again. It's to spend the next 5, maybe 10 years putting down equity for a home that's maybe an in-between, a start home, if you will. Another, fear of commitment is a big one too. Homes can be sold. So, there is this fear like, oh, what if it's not the right home or whatever. It is a big commitment. It's not to be taken lightly. But don't be afraid that you're going to be stuck there forever. So another one is, I don't have a good credit score. Again, this goes back to sitting down with a loan specialist and figuring out if your credit score meets the federal minimums. You could not have a good credit score compared to your older sibling who, you know, has impeccable credit. That doesn't mean it's too low to buy a house. And once you have that conversation with a lender, they're going to tell you if your credit isn't good enough to buy a home, they're going to help you figure out how to get it there. So that's why I would say don't be afraid and just rule out buying a home because you think your credit isn't good. So another one is I'm worried that my situation, my living situation might change. For instance, I'm single and I don't want to buy a house until I'm married, or it's just me and my partner, but we might want to have kids later. Again, you know, if it's a big change that's going to happen in the next year for sure, then yeah, definitely keep that in mind. But again, you can sell a home, you can trade up, you can come into a relationship with equity, and that's always a valuable thing to have. So I wouldn't hold yourself back from building that asset and that financial growth just because of something that might happen in the future. Okay, buying a home seems way too complicated. It is complicated. It is stressful, especially in this market. But that's why you hire a buyer's agent right off the bat that can help you, guide you through it and make it a lot less scary, a lot less complicated, and really just help you determine the basics to get you to where you need to be. Same with a loan officer. They're going to be guiding you through it the whole time. It's not as scary as it seems. Another big one I hear is, I think I should pay off my student loans before buying. I say I don't think, unless your student loans are so high that you really don't have the monthly budget to afford a home, I wouldn't let student loan debt keep you from buying a home. If you're making your payments on time and you're keeping up good credit, then putting off buying a home is actually just putting off building wealth that might help you pay down your loans faster. And nowadays, student loans are so big that you might be paying that forever, so you'll be waiting forever, and then that's lost time that you could have been building an asset. So if you guys have any other fears, I'd love to hear them, or misconceptions. Okay, so I'm seeing one of the first comments was that just how quickly things are going in this market and that you really have no time to decide on things, and you put a bid in and they took smaller offer. Yeah, so you're having trouble competing with cash buyers or people who are waiving inspections. That's a very real thing that's happening in this market. What I would say is, you know, just decide what your comfort level is. You know, you can't change the facts of if you're getting financing versus cash. Just keep trying. It is tough because it is so competitive and people really are, you know, doing all sorts of crazy stuff to get homes, but people are still getting homes not doing those things. It just might be, you might have to try for a few more before you get it. And then, you know, as far as sleeping on it, what I would say is, as soon as you see a house hit the market, start doing your research and thinking about it then. You know, schedule your showing if you can for a day or two out. And then in the meanwhile, read the seller's disclosure, drive through the neighborhood, look really deeply at the picture, then think, you know, try to pick out things that you might really dislike or things that might really make you want to buy the home, and do that planning and thinking ahead of time before the showing. Because a showing is nowadays, it's just really to make sure you actually still want it. It's not the time to first start thinking about the home because it is just such a quick turnaround now. I'll try to address that at the end of the question that was just put in. Okay. So other reason, okay, so why should you buy now in this market instead of waiting? Even though maybe the market will level out, maybe things will get less crazy. I would say it's still a good time to buy, primarily because interest rates are so low. So right now, so just to give you a little bit of context, in the last 45 years, the 30-year fixed rate mortgage interest rate ranged from 18.63% in 1981 to 3.31% in 2012. In the last 5 years, they were in the 3.5 to 4% range. And in this last year, they've gone as low as 2.7, 2.8, and are currently in the low threes. So historically speaking, we are at just insane low interest rates, and that's going to make a huge difference for what you can afford. So even if house prices go down, which historically we know that they don't go down, they might dip down, just in time for you to buy something, but they'll eventually go up. But even if they go down momentarily, but if interest rates go up, the home price that you can afford is actually going to be about the same or less than if you purchase now at these interest rates. So I don't have like an image of the numbers in front of me, but if you can, do some like Googling, and you'll see that even, a couple, 1% change in interest rate makes a huge difference in your monthly payment versus even, $10,000 or $15,000 or $20,000 difference in the sales price. So that is the number one reason why it still makes sense, and why there are so many buyers out there right now, is because they are doing that math and seeing that even though this is crazy, even though it's stressful, if you can get a house in this market, you're setting yourself up to only paying 3% to borrow the money to have that huge asset. So every payment you make, that much more of it is going towards equity. And a lot less of it is going towards interest. So speaking of equity, so, buying now versus in a year, 2 years, 5 years means that you're building equity that whole time. And what equity is it's how much of your home that you own. And that's combined with how much you've paid down of your loan, as well as how much the home value has increased. So as I mentioned, home values tend to increase. So if you bought a $100,000 home today, and it's worth $120,000 in 5 years, that's $20,000 of equity that you have, plus whatever you've paid down. So that's 5 years that you're building equity versus 5 years that you were just paying rent and you don't have anything to show for it. And that's always going to be true. So even if the market's turning up, market's turning down, it's always going to be true that the best time to buy is today. The next best time is yesterday or tomorrow. So just not to sit on it too long, because the longer you wait, the longer that opportunity passes you by. And then there's things like stability and security, a sense of community, and really being bought into where you are, and settled in to where you are, instead of worrying if you're going to have to move because your landlord raised rent or they're selling their home or whatever. It's a lot more security owning your own home. And then there's tax benefits, and it's the number one way to build wealth in this country. When you have a home and you have assets, you can build off of that in subsequent years, and you have things to pass down to your loved ones. So, owning versus renting, just a quick example. If you purchase a home for $250,000 and pay $1,200 per month towards your mortgage, over 30 years, you'll have paid $435,000, and you'll own an asset that's grown in value well over that amount. Whereas if you rent for $1,200 a month, you'll also have paid $432,000 over 30 years, and you won't own anything. So the math really makes a lot more sense buying versus renting. Now, what are some good reasons to hold off on buying? Because there definitely are some, right? So if you are going through a major life change, a divorce, if you're getting ready to get married, or if you're, planning to have children, or, working on having children or pregnant or whatever, big life changes, you maybe want to wait until you're more certain of what's going to happen. Changing jobs is another one. If you are actively seeking other employment, or you're ready to rage quit your job yesterday, maybe not the best time to buy a house, right? Or if you just started a job, maybe wait a few months, get settled in, be sure and confident that you're going to be there to stay for a while. So, in that instance, I would say hold off. Financial reasons, if you truly, sit down with the lender and it's determined that you either don't have enough down payment, you can't find it in grant programs, or your credit score is truly too low, then, you're going to have to wait, but work on those things in the meanwhile. Or if you do qualify, but you do your budget and you determine that it would really be stretching you super thin. No, we don't want to see that, right? We don't want you to put yourself in a situation where you are house poor and you can't afford to just live your life, or you're struggling to pay the bills every month and could, if anything happens, you get foreclosed on, right? So we don't want to see that. So, as much as that is buying a home is a good idea, there are some good reasons to hold off. And then also, if you think that you're going to be moving in the next, 2-3 years, I would probably hold off. Maybe right now in this market, you might be okay, but in a typical market, you don't really, you don't have as much equity in the house in the first few years. So when you turn around to sell it, with all the fees and things associated with selling, you might end up, with negative appreciation, or just breaking even if you're lucky. So if you're not planning to be there at least 5 years, I would probably hold off until you're somewhere where you would want to stay there for 5 years. So I think most people who are on this call know that we're in a seller's market. What that means is that there's very little supply of homes, very few people selling their homes relative to the number of people who are buying. So because the interest rates are so low, because of COVID and all the changes that came with that, all the lifestyle changes that people want, so there's many more buyers than there are sellers. And what that means is you're having competition for almost every home that you're looking at. And sellers are really in the driver's seat as far as what they're asking for. Buyers are, as someone mentioned, paying in cash, they're paying way over asking price, they're waiving contingencies and things like that. And that is a reality of the market. That doesn't mean that you have to do all those things. It just means that that's who you're going to be often competing with. I would still encourage you, just figure out what you're comfortable with. Maybe, if you're having a hard time competing with people, maybe set your sights a little lower. Go for a lower price range than you were thinking, so that you can offer over, or readjust some of your expectations, like we talked about before. Maybe instead of buying your dream house right now, maybe something that you would be okay with having for just 5 years and trading up. So it's tough. It's really tough out there. But I would say don't give up. There's always going to be some way to get where you need to be. All right, so it sounds like some of you are already in the process of buying, so maybe already working with an agent, but I'll go over the steps to home ownership anyway, just in case there's anybody on here who's just getting started. So first step is to hire your real estate agent. And the reason why I recommend this first is because they're going to, especially in this market, they're going to be able to guide you through everything. So everything that I'm telling you right now, they'll also be able to tell you, and to kind of hold your hand through the process. I know when I was first starting to look at homes before I had my real estate license, I was just, kind of clicking through Zillow. When I saw a house I liked, I would click the contact agent, and it would just send me to a random agent who I would just, say, hey, open the door for me. And that was fine. I got in to see houses, but I didn't realize until after I got my license how much I was really going into it blind. How I was really, there was so much information that I could have had at my disposal before that, that I didn't, because I didn't know, because I didn't have a buyer's agent who was helping me. So for instance, if I saw a house that I liked, doing research about it beforehand, looking at comps, looking at how competitive that listing might be or whatever. So really, first thing is find a realtor who you're comfortable with, who matches your personality, who you feel like really listens to you and understands what you're looking for, who's knowledgeable about the area that you're looking in, someone who's really big into educating themselves and is really working to understand this market and how to be competitive in this market. Someone with experience making winning offers. So I would start with that. They'll also usually be able to recommend you to everyone else down the line, lenders, inspectors, things like that. So it's really like having, this awesome like concierge kind of, just like guiding you through the way. And the best part is that most of the time sellers pay the commission. So you're not really paying for that service. It's just an awesome service that you just get to have from day one. So when you pick an agent or when you meet with agents and you pick one that works for you, the first thing you're going to do is sign a buyer's representation agreement. And what that does is it sets the expectation that agent is working for you and you're only working with that agent. What that allows them to do is say, okay, this is my client. I have a duty to them to guide them, advise them, and help them find the best possible house they can. They might even go out of their way and try to find off-market deals for you and whatever it is, but it sets that expectation up front, I'm yours and you're mine. And what that also means is that you're really not supposed to be communicating with other agents, even if, they post something interesting on Facebook, which happens a lot. And then after picking your agent, you'll want to do the same kind of interview process with lenders. So you'll want to, pick a couple that are either recommended by your agent or by friends who have recently purchased. Right now, the lender that you choose actually is going to have a big difference on whether or not your offer gets accepted. And I'll tell you why. Listing agents, when they get 14 offers on a home, one of the first things they look at for the offers, if it's competitive in line with some of the other offers, they'll say, who's their lender? And they'll call the lender sometimes and they'll ask, is this a financially viable buyer? And if your lender isn't prepared to speak on your behalf, if they haven't really done the digging and the research and the work it takes to actually pre-qualify a buyer, that listing agent is going to walk away with an unsure feeling about you. So you want a rock solid lender who's got a proven track record, who's highly recommended by either your realtor or other realtors that you know, or another buyer who's recently gotten a loan approved with that person on their, or gotten an offer approved with that person on their offer. But that's a lot more important than people realize. So, and then I generally tend to discourage people from working with like credit unions or the big banks, just because they're a lot more bureaucratic. The people who work there, it's kind of, they're not dealing with the hundreds of loans a month that a loan officer is, that someone whose full-time job is writing loans. And so they're going to be less nimble in this really competitive market. They're not going to have the answers that the listing agent is looking for when they call. And they're more likely than others to pre-approve someone without doing all of the research and all of the digging that they should have done that will eventually come up later. And so I've seen more deals fall apart from those types of loans than from someone who is doing all that work up front. So once you choose a lender, you're going to ask them for a mortgage pre-approval. So you're going to make an application with them. They're going to dig into your finances. They're going to look at your debt, your income. They're going to generally determine whether if you were to find a house today, are you going to actually be able to buy it? And they're going to give you a pre-approval. Now that's different from a pre-qualification. Pre-qualification doesn't go in as in depth as the pre-approval. And in this market, an offer with pre-qualification is just not going to get accepted. Okay, so you might meet with the lender and they might tell you your finances look great, everything looks awesome, you qualify for a $400,000 home. Now, instead of just going out and starting to look for $400,000 homes, the next thing I would do is ask them, what is the monthly payment on this $400,000 home? And determine if that payment actually fits into your budget. Because a lot of times you might get approved for way more than you are actually comfortable spending. So if you don't already have a monthly budget in writing, create one, determine what your current expenses are compared to your income, and decide how much you can fit in a home loan. So if you're already paying rent and it's $1,200 a month, but you think you would be comfortable still at $1,500 a month, then that's your number. If you think $1,200 is already a stretch, let's keep it at that, then that's your number, and you might need to ask your lender to come to, your approval will still be the same, but you'll ask them, if I want to stay at $1,200 a month, what is that loan amount? And that's really going to be the more important number. So they might say, okay, if you want to stay at $1,200 a month, you might want to stay in the $300,000 range instead. It's actually probably 200, but you know what I mean. So don't just go based on the pre-approval. It's really way more important for your long-term ability to afford the home to decide what's comfortable in your monthly budget. Okay, so the main components of the loan and what is going to affect your monthly payment is the term, so how many years you're paying that loan, the interest rate, and your down payment. So as we talked about, down payment doesn't have to be 20%. It can be as low as 3%. But what your down payment is, it's paying part of your home purchase, right? So if it's a $200,000 house and you have a $10,000 down payment, the rest of your loan is $190,000. Whereas if you paid $50,000, the rest of your loan is $150,000, right? So paying a monthly payment on $190,000 is going to be a higher monthly payment than on $150,000. So you're gonna maybe have to tweak the numbers and figure out if you want a certain monthly payment to adjust your down payment, or kind of shift things around that way. But that's going to make a big difference on what you pay. Your interest rate is actually going to make an even bigger difference in what you pay, and it's going to make a difference in what you pay over the life of the loan too. And then your term, of course, if you're paying it over 15 years instead of 30 years, it's going to be a lot higher. So the 4 things that go into your monthly mortgage payment, so it's your principal, which we talked about, your actual loan amount, which is affected by your down payment. There's also the interest that gets added to the loan every month. But then you also have to remember there's taxes and insurance. So your state and local taxes get added to your monthly mortgage payment, and so does your homeowner's insurance. So it's PITI, PITI. Those are the 4 things that you really need to make sure you factor in when you're doing your monthly, your monthly payments. Okay, and then once you have your pre-approval, you want to make sure you maintain it. So whatever conditions you got that approval under, you want to make sure they stay the same. So don't make any big purchases. Don't put anything big on your credit cards. Don't change jobs. Don't add a new credit card or any sort of new credit. Don't, buy a car or anything like that. And then protect your down payment. So that is gold. Don't lend anyone money. Don't do anything that would jeopardize that down payment and those closing costs too that you're going to need to get to settlement. I have seen it happen that someone lends someone money and then doesn't have it at settlement, and it's a nightmare, believe me. Okay, so once you have your pre-approval, now's the fun part. You get to actually start looking for a home. But you're not just going to look willy-nilly. You want to sit down with your agent and you want to talk about what you're looking for, what are needs versus wants, what you really have to have or would really desire to have versus what would just be nice to have. Learn about what's going on in the market. Especially in this market, you want to really understand how things are moving, the speed, and be prepared for that, because it's going to be a rude awakening if you think you're going to get 2 days and a second showing to decide on a house, and you realize you only get a 15-minute showing and you need to decide today. So understand the market. Refine your search if you need to, or expand your search if you're really not finding anything in those preliminary criteria. Okay, so this is a big one right now is once you find the house that you like, the next step is making an offer. And this is where, things are getting really tricky and scary in this market because, you're competing with other offers. So you're really having to think about what can I offer to the seller to make them choose me over another buyer. So of course, a higher price, is always going to sway someone. But you want to base that somewhat in reality. So you want to understand what comparable home prices have sold for. You of course want to decide if that price works for you and your budget. And basically just work with your agent to decide how much you can afford. It's almost a given now that it's going to be over asking price. So I honestly wouldn't even be so attached to asking price as much as I would looking at comparables, looking at how much over asking price the comparables went for, and then when you pick your number, running that past your lender and asking, one, am I approved for this amount? And two, what's that monthly payment? And am I still comfortable with that monthly payment? So then you also want to offer terms that are appealing to the seller. So a big one is schedule. Some sellers want to be sold right away. Some sellers really need time to pack up and move. Some sellers need an extended amount of time to find their house in this same crazy market. So that's a big one that's always worth asking. What's your preferred schedule? Earnest money deposit is another thing you're going to put in your offer, and it's basically a deposit that shows the seller that or that tells the seller that if you don't follow the contract or if you back out or change your mind, that you're giving up that money. So it's kind of like putting your money where your mouth is. So the bigger deposit you can put down, the better. What's good about the deposit and makes it not as scary is that that does get applied to your closing costs at settlement. So you're not just giving that money away, you're just parking it and saying, I am telling you that I'm going to abide by the contract. And if I don't, you get to keep this. And then just make sure you abide by the contract. Now, that doesn't mean that if you elected to have inspections and you don't like what came up in inspection, that doesn't mean that you would lose that. That just means, you got to follow what you put in the contract. And then there's other contingencies. So your mortgage, if you're getting a mortgage, that's a contingency. If you're getting inspection, that's a contingency. Appraisals, things like that. So really every contingency that's in your offer presents a risk to the seller. So it presents a chance for you to negotiate later down the line that they don't want. So the fewer contingencies you can have, the better. But of course, you always have to stay with what is comfortable for you. You never want to, you know, even if it's the only way to get a house, you don't want to get a house if you had to do something that puts you at risk or makes you really uncomfortable. So just always keep that in mind. It is crazy out there. There are people waiving inspections. There are people paying over the appraised value or paying cash, doing everything they can to eliminate these contingencies, but you really have to just sit and think about what you're comfortable with. And then just remember, everything is negotiable. So that's where your agent's really going to help you figure out what things you can offer and what you can negotiate to try to win that offer. So then once you hopefully get an offer accepted, the next step is doing, if you've elected home inspection, to do your home inspection. So it's usually about 10 days that you have to hire an inspector to come review all the main components of the home and tell you if there's any major issues. And then for you to come back to the seller and say, either I'm good with this, I'm ready to move forward, or there are some major issues and I want you to address them, or there are just a crazy amount of issues and I can't deal with this and I want to terminate. And if you terminate, you will get your deposit back if you had elected the inspection contingency. And then once you're done with your, so what I would say about inspections is, you know, it is really hard to find a house in this market. If you found a house that you really loved and you made an offer and your offer got accepted, that's already 10 times better than a lot of people are doing right now. So what I would say when it comes to inspection is don't sweat the small stuff. Because if you, you know, make a big fuss over these small things and end up walking away from this home over things that you really could have fixed, you might end up spending more money later on another house that you had to pay, you know, more for. So just keep that in perspective, like what it took to get to this house and what it would take to get another house when you're thinking about what comes up in inspection. So obviously, you know, if you have foundation issues, if you have cracks that aren't settling cracks, if you have water stains, roof issues, plumbing or electrical problems, mold or termite, those are big. Those are a big deal. They're expensive to fix. They're like peeling back an onion. Sometimes what you see is not even as bad as what you end up getting. So that stuff, obviously be mindful of. But you know, if it's something, basically just think about the cost it would be to fix it, how much more it would cost to offer on another house, and just keep that in mind. So then once you're through inspections, you're gonna, basically at that point, your lender is gonna be in the process of writing your loan. So you're just gonna wanna, again, maintain your pre-approval. Don't do anything that would affect your ability to close. No credit, no big purchases, no giving away money. And then just work with your lender to provide any documentation that they require. Make sure that gets done in a timely manner. You don't want to have any delays to your lending process. And then a day before or the day of your closing, you'll get to do a final walkthrough of the home and just make sure that everything is as it was promised. So everything looks the same as it did before. Any repairs that were requested are completed. The sellers are actually out of the home and all that. And then you go to settlement, and that's actually the most anticlimactic thing, especially with COVID, because it's probably just going to be you and a title company. But you go, you sign a bunch of forms, and you're a homeowner. And then after that, you just want to make sure that you're maintaining your home and keeping it in nice condition, so that value does continue to appreciate. And then when you want to sell and trade up, you can. So that's it pretty much for the steps. Does anyone have any questions or big takeaways or anything else that they'd like me to cover? We've got about 15 minutes.
Feel free to unmute or type your question or comment in the chat.
And I'm just gonna put, for the people who came late, I'm gonna put in my contact information as well as the link to provide feedback that will get you a free treat at Paloma's Market. I saw a question earlier about first-time home buyers. So it's really going to be specific to the buyer. There are a lot of programs out there, but your lender that you work with will be able to search for one that you specifically qualify for. But there are like a ton of programs. I had one that just gave my buyer $10,000 towards closing costs. So that's huge. They didn't have enough to buy. And they were asking for seller's assist, which in this market isn't happening at all. They were losing out on offers. And then by getting that grant, that was able to help them to be more competitive. And then I got a private question that says, what if sellers prefer conventional financing as opposed to better deals that you're eligible for? So it's not a good deal if you don't get a house, right? So if you are looking at FHA financing or VA financing, and it's a great interest rate or a great or low fees, that's awesome. But if you can't get an offer accepted, then it's not a good deal. So that's what I would say to that is right now you got to focus on making the most competitive offer that you can, and the cost of using that loan program and losing out on homes is higher than whatever savings you're going to get from that program. But generally, sellers don't have issues with grant programs at all because it doesn't affect them. They don't like certain types of financing because they're more stringent and require more, might require repairs and things like that. They don't want to deal with that. I don't see any questions. Does anyone want to unmute and ask anything? Who in here has actually started the search process already? Okay, so I don't see any more questions, and I don't think anyone's gonna unmute themselves, Mark. So I think that's probably it for us.
Okay. Well, appreciate it once again, Paloma. Wonderful information, and thank you everyone who's joined us tonight. You'll be able to find a recording of this on the library's YouTube channel if you missed part of the presentation and want to review it or share it with others.
Thank you guys so much for joining.
Have a good night, everybody.
Good night.
Thanks so much.